Hello, and welcome to this short training presentation on interview skills. We have put this course together with a view to helping you develop or enhance your interview skills and technique. The skills covered in this course will be skills for life. Once you know how to approach an interview, you will have an edge over others who have not researched or prepared appropriately. For many people, performing well at an interview doesn't come easy. But good news is that these skills can be learned. At the end of this course, you will know how to best prepare yourself for an interview and how to approach answering interview questions in order to ensure success. Any interview is simply an exchange of information between people. In relation to a job interview, its purpose is to ascertain if there is a sufficient fit between an employer's requirements and a candidate's abilities. So throughout this training, we'll take a look at the interview from both the employer's perspective and the candidate's perspective. On screen now is the content for this course that includes an overview of the various interview types and structures that you could be faced with at an interview, an explanation of what a competency is, a question response model for answering questions effectively, some interview preparation activities that you'll need to carry out prior to the interview, and some general interview advice. So let's start with the interview types and structures that you could experience. The sequential or series of interviews approach is usually completed on a one-to-one basis and is used a lot by large corporations. Often these interviews are completed on the same day, so it can be a matter of going from room to room over a period of hours and answering questions from different interviewers, usually people from various disciplines in the business like HR, finance, operations and IT, etc. Each interview will be structured differently. So for example, an interview with human resource manager might be quite competency based, which we'll have a look at later in this training, while the interview questions asked by a prospective future boss may probe the technical knowledge that is required for the role. Interviewers will of course compare notes at the end of the interviewing process, so while you need to be consistent in what you say, it's an idea to have a variety of examples to illustrate your core competencies and skills so that you can tailor your conversation to the person you are talking to. The technical interview focuses in on your technical knowledge and abilities. So for example, if you're going for a role in IT, the interviewer is obviously going to be asking you questions around your experience of programming. This is where you have a chance to shine and demonstrate your ability in your area of expertise. The preparation you need to complete for this interview is to have all of your experience, your training, your learning that you have completed through the years to the forefront of your mind. Scenarios could be presented to you at the interview in order to test both your technical knowledge and problem-solving skills, so it's worth reflecting on how you've gone about solving technical problems or challenges in the past. For the panel approach, there could be any number of interviewers present, but usually it's somewhere between 2 and 5 people, depending on the seniority of the role, from different parts of the business, so you're being assessed from different perspectives. Typically, the panel would include the hiring manager, that's the person who's going to be your boss, someone from human resources, and potentially other specialist managers from various business disciplines such as finance or IT or operations. The objective of a panel interview is to ensure that when it comes to making the decision, all business perspectives and observations of the interview panel are taken into account. It's very similar in principle to the sequential interview, except in this case all the interviewers are attending at the same time. Typically, you will be asked one question at a time by one of the interviewers, and the rest of the panel will observe and take notes. So when answering questions from a panel of interviewers, while your initial response can be directed back to the person who asked the question, it's quite normal and indeed natural to make eye contact with the rest of the panel also from time to time. One type of interview that's becoming much more common these days is the telephone or video call interview. While some organisations use telephone interviews at the start of the process to screen large numbers of candidates in order to reduce the number for face-to-face interview, other companies can use this medium throughout the recruitment process. So potentially you could be asked to take part in a teleconference or video call with a company executive, possibly even based in another country if it's a global corporation. Regardless of the reason, it is important to be as prepared for this interview as you would for a face-to-face one, and to communicate clearly and professionally. Make sure that you are taking the call in a quiet location, and if it's a video call, that you dress appropriately and sit in an area with an appropriate background. After that, the preparation you do for a telecall interview is the same for a face-to-face conversation. Ultimately, the purpose of the call is to assess if you are suitable for the role on offer. So now we'll turn our attention to the interview questions themselves. Let's start with the straightforward questions first, the ones that you should know the answers to regardless of the role or position you're going for. The straightforward questions will mainly focus on the content of your CV and your interest in the position or role. They'll ask you questions around your education, any recent work history that you may have done, the skills that you've developed, what you believe you've achieved to date, why you should be considered for the role you are now applying for, any future goals. You'll also be asked questions around what you know about the company. So make sure you've done some good research here using the company website or news articles to inform yourself. On screen now are some typical interview questions that are generally asked by many interviewers, so it's good to have a clear response developed to these. Even as an exercise on a regular basis, it's good to pick a question at random and consider how you would answer it. This really helps develop your self-awareness. That is, how much you know and understand about your own motivations, your preferred ways of behaving, your goals and aspirations. Remember, they're not questions you are asked every day of the week, so it can be difficult to respond clearly and comprehensively if you haven't done a certain amount of preparation in advance. So do take the time. Just one final point to note. Assume that anything on your CV could be raised as a topic of conversation at an interview. This stands for hobbies and interests too, so make sure you can talk your CV comprehensively and clearly. While all of these questions are very useful in confirming certain facts submitted in your application, it doesn't necessarily provide the interviewer with any great sense of how you might perform in the role they're looking to fill. There are other questions that will be asked throughout the interview that will give the interviewer a far more comprehensive insight of your capabilities, and these are known as competency-based questions. So what is a competency? In simple terms, a competency means the ability to do. Competencies are the collection of key attributes or characteristics or behaviours and knowledge exhibited by successful performers in a particular job role. They work hand in hand with the technical knowledge required to hold down the job. So as an example, let's take a look at the role of management consultant for a minute, which will help us see how competencies make up a job role. So from a technical knowledge perspective, a management consultant may need to show they have a wide knowledge and understanding of computer technologies. They may have to demonstrate that they have the skills of Microsoft Word, Access, PowerPoint. Or they might have to show that they have some form of project management experience, even if it's just managing internal college projects. However, a management consultant as part of their role will also have to perform activities such as meeting with clients, handling multiple priorities at once, developing solutions for problems or issues as they arise, and communicating effectively with others. How well the candidate performs these activities is directly related to their competency level. On screen now are a list of some sample competencies. Competency-based interviews are designed to elicit information and examples of your actual behaviour in order to predict how you would behave in a variety of work situations. Competency-based questions focus on the past. That is, how did you behave in a particular situation? So examples could be something like, how do you plan new projects? Or where have you demonstrated leadership when working with others? Or how do you influence others? To answer these questions effectively, you will need to show that A, you possess this competency, and B, that you have used this competency effectively in the past in dealing with a particular situation. So now that you know a little more about what competency is, let's take a look at how you prepare in advance for answering questions like these. When preparing for an interview, always start with the job spec or job advertisement. If it's written well, it should have the following components: a list of the key responsibilities, a list of the key or essential requirements, a list of core competencies, and a list of desirable requirements. The key responsibilities outline the major areas of accountability and the key functions of your role. It provides you with an insight as to what the role entails, and it may also include typical tasks and duties that you need to perform in order to meet those responsibilities. The key or essential requirements usually relate to things like certain qualifications or degrees attained, a required number of years of experience in a particular role, or experience with using certain systems or technologies. Usually you won't gain an interview if you don't meet the key or essential requirements, so it's important that you include these on your CV at the time of application. The core competencies are those personal attributes that are required to carry out the role successfully. So you will see words here such as teamwork, resilience, leadership potential. While your CV may include some of these competencies, or your experience may suggest that you possess these, the only way for the interviewer to confirm if you possess these attributes is to ask you competency-based questions. So it's important that you prepare for these in advance. The list of desirable requirements may not be a prerequisite for you achieving an interview, but in situations where candidates have all completed a good interview, the interviewers may review the additional qualifications and attributes of the candidates in order to help them make their final decision. So, once you've reviewed the job spec, go back over your own CV to help you determine where you have previously demonstrated the core competencies they are looking for. You will most certainly be asked questions on these, so it's very much something you can prepare for in advance. So let's assume for this example that one of the competencies being explored is leadership potential. So the question will be phrased something like this. Tell me about a time when you've had to take a leadership role as part of a team. Your first response should be a clear, upfront statement confirming that you have experience of this area. So step one to responding to a question is make the point. Make the point stating that you've experienced this, or you're good at this, or that you can do it. For example, I was working on an end-of-year college assignment as part of a team, and the group couldn't agree on the next course of action for the project, so I stepped in to bring the various team members together. From that statement, the interviewer knows that you have certainly met a challenge in the past relating to that competency, so they will be listening intently now to hear how you handled the situation. That's great. You now have the interviewer's attention. After you've clearly stated that you have experience of this particular competency, step two then is support the point. That is, use some detail that leads to a specific example. Various models can be used here to help you support your point. The STAR model stands for situation, task, action and result. So you describe briefly the situation where you've had to demonstrate leadership, the tasks and action you had to do in order to achieve this, and the result or outcome. An even simpler model is issue, action and outcome. So describe the issue or challenge you faced, describe the action you took, and then detail the outcome. If you can think of a number of situations, then allude to these at the start of your response, but talk specifically about just one of them. This shows that you encountered this type of situation more than once, illustrating your depth of experience in this area. After you have made your point and backed it up with evidence, step 3 then is about summarising the experience or showing the significance of what you experienced. Something like, you are more knowledgeable on the importance of good leadership within a team, or you recognise the importance of good working relationships in order to achieve successful business outcomes. So the 3-step model of make the point, support the point, and summarise what you've learned provides you with an approach to answering competency-based questions and ensures you communicate effectively with your interviewer. Clarity is very important when answering questions. Remember, the interviewer doesn't know all the experience you have. Therefore, you need to describe it to them as clearly and concisely as you can. It takes some time to prepare for an interview, so to help you put a bit more structure around your preparation, take a look at the following headings. You might want to write these out on a blank page after the training and then complete the exercise. The first heading is My Agenda, the points I want to make. These are a summary of your key attributes and the reasons why you believe you should be employed for the role. Think of these as your strongest arguments as to why you should get the job. So your goal at the interview will be to make sure you get these points across in some way to the interviewer. So let's say the points you want to make relate to the following areas: your technical experience in software development, your internship experiences in different companies, your personal achievements in sport. So to develop these points, start by writing out in longhand what your experience is of each one. 1 page per topic. By writing it out or typing it out, it forces you to think about the key points you want to make. Once you've considered your experience in this area, you can develop a few very clear points that will help you remember what to say on the day. So under personal achievements in sport, for example, it might be something like experience of leading a team or experience of coaching others. Once you've done this and have developed 5 to 6 key points in column 1, turn to column 2 and think of ways of making your point interesting to the interviewer. Short, to the point, memorable description of what you did or achieved. So let's take the example of experience of coaching others. Maybe the team that you coached went on to have an achievement and won a county final cup. That's memorable. Now turn your attention to column 3, their agenda, and ask yourself, if I was hiring, what would I be looking for? Write down your response to this question in column 3. To help you, go back over the job advertisement, look at the competencies and the key requirements. You must be able to show that you possess these if you are to be successful at the interview. Now you need to check to make sure that what you have in column 1, my agenda, matches column 3, their agenda. If there are gaps, then go back over your experience to find examples that match up with the skills and competencies they are looking for. The next step is to think of questions that you would prefer not to be asked, the nasty questions category. Maybe these are gaps in your CV where you took time off, or you had a number of jobs over a short period of time. You can certainly expect questions on these areas, so you'll need to prepare for them also. On this point, more and more interviewers are asking more probing questions around interests and hobbies. So ensure that whatever interests you put down on your CV are ones you can talk about in detail. There was a time where this section of the CV was generally ignored or only referred to briefly, but not now. Activities outside of work, such as participation in sport or volunteering for charities, all show how the interviewee engages with others, which is an important attribute in an employee. If you are a recent graduate or are applying for an internship and have limited work experience, then be prepared to answer competency-based questions around your hobbies and non-work activities. So build up strong examples of these that you can use. At the interview, you will need to show that you have done some research on the company. So use the internet to explore the company website and look out for past or current references to the company in the news. Ask yourself questions like, what sets the employer apart? What are their stated values? What challenges are facing their industry? Who are their main competitors? Showing you have done your research on the company demonstrates that you are interested in working for them. Finally, in most interviews, towards the end of the meeting, the interviewer will ask, do you have any questions for us? Preparing a few questions in advance to ask the interviewer is good practice. Sometimes these questions will have been answered naturally throughout your conversation, so no harm in preparing up to 4 questions just in case. Some sample questions could include, what are the current priorities of the role? Or, what are the current company challenges that this role will seek to address? At the end of the interview, if you are asked, is there anything else you would like to add? This is your opportunity to reply with a summary of the key points you had prepared. Reiterate your keen interest in the role and the 4 to 5 key qualities that you can bring to the company. Finally, thank the interviewers for taking the time to meet with you. So at this stage, now that you have prepared well for your interview, let's take a look at some general advice and some do's and don'ts of a job interview. The first point is arrive early. Make sure you arrive 10 to 15 minutes before the appointed time. If the area is unfamiliar to you, do research in advance in terms of how to get there. Some companies operate out of a number of buildings in close proximity to another. So if you're in any doubt, phone the company a few days before and confirm the directions with them. The second point is dress appropriately. You've heard the expression, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. Feeling good about how you look also helps with your confidence levels, so it's very much for your benefit to be well groomed. When you first meet the interviewer, stand up, smile, make eye contact, and complete a confident handshake. Point 3 is answer the question that's asked. This is quite a common mistake to make, either through nervousness or simply because the interviewee didn't understand the question. There's absolutely no problem in asking the interviewer to clarify the question asked, or indeed to ask for the question to be repeated. So in other words, be clear on what the interviewer is asking you before you respond with your answer. Point number 4 is keep on topic. Remember the preparation you completed in the last module in terms of preparing responses to potential questions? Well, this is where it comes into play. If you stick to the model of make the point, support the point, and summarize, you won't get yourself into a position where you'll go off on tangent. Point 5, use strong, assertive language. Words such as maybe, I could, I think, or probably can create doubt in an interviewer's mind as to your abilities. When you're practicing the responses to questions in advance of the interview, listen out for these words and, where necessary, replace them with more assertive language such as I can, I believe, I will. These are much more powerful to the listener. After the interview, take a few minutes for yourself to evaluate your own performance. Go for a cup of coffee and write down the questions that you can remember while they're still fresh in your mind. Ask yourself, what questions did I answer well? What ones did I find difficult? And what will I do better or differently next time? As we said at the start of this course, interview skills don't come naturally to many people, but the good news is that with practice, these skills can be learned and indeed perfected. On screen now are some final words of advice. I hope this training has been of benefit to you, and best of success at your next interview.